The statute was presented by the European Union, but also with the United States present, and very much part of this. It has been considered by the European Union and the United States to have been prepared in a manner that is fully respectful of Kosovo's constitution. And let me remind you of the United States government's position of what the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities should be. We've said this many times. It should be consistent with Kosovo's current constitution. No constitutional changes should be required. It should be consistent with the Constitutional Court decision. It should not have executive authorities. It should not be an additional layer of government. It should be consistent with the views that we laid out in our January article by the Counselor of the State Department, Derek Chollet, and our Special Envoy for the Balkans and Deputy Assistant Secretary, Gabriel Escobar. We believe this draft statute that was provided to the government of Kosovo fulfills all those criteria, that it meets those criteria. So we believe it to be, and have written in a way to be consistent with Kosovo's constitution. But there's really only one entity that can ultimately make the decision as to whether it is consistent with Kosovo's constitution or not, and that's the Constitutional Court. And as Prime Minister Kurti said to the Assembly on Friday, one of the provisions in this draft statute is that it will go to the Constitutional Court so that it can make that review and make that determination before it enters into force. So I think a lot of these questions and comments and almost hysteria about its constitutionality seems misplaced for us, because there's careful work that's been put into drafting this statute and provisions in place to ensure that the one body in Kosovo that actually has the ability and the authority to determine its constitutionality, the Constitutional Court, will have the opportunity to do so before it would enter into force. Well, let me start with the back part, the so-called secrecy. There's nothing secret here, but diplomatic negotiations and sensitive engagements by the international community with governments oftentimes are done in conditions of discretion, because conditions of discretion lend themselves more appropriately to actually coming to common understandings and advancing things. And whether it was agreements in the dialogue, agreements in Rambouillet, agreements under Adasari, lots of different things. There are times when the public is made aware of things, and there's times when confidential diplomatic exchanges go back and forth as you narrow down differences and do things. So I don't think any of us apologize for having confidential or discreet conversations with the government of Kosovo on a very sensitive issue. At an appropriate time, I'm sure the public will have the ability to assess the draft statute. That time, is going to be determined by a combination of the government and Miroslav Lajčák, appropriately so. On the timeline itself, if you read the statement issued by the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, the Prime Minister of Italy, and may I pause to say how extraordinary it is that these three very senior European leaders are involving themselves directly in this process to help Kosovo move forward in its European and Euro-Atlantic vocation and to normalize its relationship with Serbia to the benefit of both countries, but in particular to the people of Kosovo. They use language like urgent, as quickly as possible, things like that. So there is an urgency, there is a desire to see it move quickly, and that is part of our conversation with the government now. There's no reason for the government of Kosovo not to move forward with this draft statute. The Prime Minister acknowledged his readiness to have accepted it in its entirety just a couple weeks ago. Well, first of all, I've been amused by the number of people who are interpreting a draft statute they haven't seen. That's a pretty impressive trick. And at the end of the day, those who haven't seen the statute probably don't have much grounds to be able to opine about the draft statute. I can only say what I said before. The United States believes strongly that the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities should conform with Kosovo's current constitution. It should conform with the Constitutional Court decision. It should not be an additional layer of government. There should not be any executive authorities. And so I don't see how you have autonomy under those circumstances. You don't. And we believe strongly that this draft statute that has been presented to the government of Kosovo conforms with those criteria that I've laid out.